Okay, in this tutorial I'm going to help you answer a question that answers this one that you can see in front of you, which is a question about a flood hydrograph for the river Leri, and we are looking at what the river does after a rain event. And we've got two parts to this question. We have a describe part that we can see here, and we have a suggest reasons for those changes here. We can see that there's 10 marks. Now, you can actually get more marks from one of these parts than the other, but what we're going to try to do is look at how we can get 5 marks for describing changes and 5 marks for offering reasons. And I'll give you some additional points which you could use in order to guarantee that you get the full 10 marks. Okay, so we'll have a little extra mark in reserve when we write our answer. You've got to remember that you are talking about the discharge changes on the line that I'm showing you here, and you're not describing the rainfall changes which are shown by the bars on this graph. Why is that important to remember? Because the question is asking you for described changes in the discharge levels. Now clearly you are going to be referring to the rainfall because that's one of the key reasons for the changes that we see. And we're also going to explore other characteristics of the drainage basin, that means the surrounding landscape around the River Leri, that might also explain these changes. Okay, so let's get going with an answer to this question. Well, the first change we're going to say is that actually there is very little rainfall from, there's very little change in the discharge in the first 4 hours. Okay, so you would say from 10 o'clock in the morning to 2 o'clock in the afternoon, the river level's discharge only increases very slightly from about, I would say, maybe 4 cumex to maybe 5 cumex, okay, over the first 4 hours. Now, instead of going any further, what you want to then say is, you want to give a reason for that. And what you're going to say is, this is because there is no rain at 10 o'clock in the morning, and at between 11 and 12, there's only a slight amount of rainfall. And what you're going to say there is that there is around about only 2 millimeters of rainfall, and I get that from over there on this scale. Now, why does the river levels from 2 o'clock increase? So before we get to that, we then need to say, our first point is that, let me just pick this up, from 2 o'clock, the river levels rise from about 5 cumex to about 25 cumex at 6 o'clock in the evening. Okay. Why is there this increase? Well, this reflects the rising rainfall levels from 1 o'clock in the afternoon to 3 o'clock, where it rises to about 5 millimeters. Okay, at about 5 o'clock in the afternoon. Now, the rainfall, let's go back to, remember we're describing it, then for the next 2 hours from about 6 o'clock to 8 o'clock, the river levels don't change. They stay at around about 25. Why is this? Well, let's just clear off this. This is because between 4 o'clock and 5 o'clock, those 2 hours there, the rainfall levels drop back down to just over about 3 millimeters, and that's why the river slows down in its increase. Okay, next change, we now see the big change in the graph, and that's what we need to tell the story of. So from about 8 o'clock through to the peak at 2 o'clock in the morning, which is there, we see a rapid rise from around about 25 cumex to a peak of over 80 cumex. Now, why is this? Now, we're going to get a lot of marks at this point. The first one is because there's a dramatic rise from 6 o'clock, this bar here, to 9 o'clock in the amount of rain. And at 9 o'clock, we have 12 millimeters of rain falling. And that is the peak rainfall at 9 o'clock. And that's the first reason. We have a peak rainfall at 9 o'clock, and that's why our river hits peak discharge over 80 cumex at 2 o'clock in the morning. But why this rapid rise? Now, this is where we can start picking up marks that go beyond rainfall. Now, the rapid rise and the short lag time, because we have a lag time, so at the end of the 9th hour, 9 o'clock in the evening, we have the peak rainfall, and then 2 o'clock in the morning, we have the peak discharge. So we have a 5-hour lag time, which is quite short. So why the 5-hour lag time? So what we can say is there's a short 5-hour lag time because this river might be in an urban landscape and therefore the water is being transferred quickly across the tarmac and the roads and the cityscape because it cannot infiltrate into the soils and the ground. Another reason is there might be a lack of vegetation on this landscape, which furthermore would stop water being absorbed and would cause all of the water to be discharging directly into our river, which would cause this very high peak. Furthermore, we could also say that our drainage basin might be very small, so water's quickly arriving at our river because of the small drainage basin. And also if there's a steep slopes around it, it would also explain why water's travelling down those steep gradients quickly and therefore getting to the river quick. So I've given you 4 reasons there, and they're all explanations. They're all picking up marks from this part of the question. Lastly, let's finish off the answer. There is a dramatic drop from 2 o'clock in the morning at 85 QMX down to here, where it drops down to about back down to 5 QMX. Why is there this steep fall? And then we can give 2 reasons. First reason I would say is that the rainfall stops after 1 o'clock in the morning, and therefore because there's no more rain after 1, we would expect the river level to be dropping. We might also say that because of maybe, let's give another reason we've not introduced yet, maybe because the rock in the landscape is impermeable, it's not absorbing any water, and therefore all of the water's not being stored in the landscape, and therefore it's just moving through across the surface very quickly. Okay, if rock was able to store water because it was permeable, then the river would probably come down, but it would come down more like this, because water would continually come from the rock and feed the river. But this dramatic drop suggests the landscape's not storing any water at all. Right, now I've given you way more than your 10 marks, but you've got lots of description. You only get a descriptive mark when you actually give data from your discharge. Tell me about changing discharges. When you mention rainfall changes, you want to tell me about the amount of millimetres of rain, and then you pick up your suggesting reasons. A lot of them come from changes in rainfall, but some of them come from drainage basin characteristics, which you would also want to include in your answer.